Thank you all for coming out to join us in celebrating the Peter and Esther Jackson family from Simsbury, Connecticut. This has been a long time coming to have this event, and I'm ecstatic that so many people showed up to celebrate this historic family. We're gonna get things started with a song by singer, artist, songwriter, Horan Walker.
Thank you. Clap your hands for me.
I feel like I'm in church, amen. All right, go ahead, Horan. All right, now I'd like to welcome up Reverend Jean Ott for our invocation.
Good morning. You know, before I offer the invocation, I just want to say I'm moving a week from today, and what a wonderful opportunity to kind of round out my time in Simsbury. This is the community that I have come to know and love. This is exactly what I expect from everybody here, is to take a break and to pack a room and to celebrate our siblings and those who have gone before us. So thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for being here, everybody. Let's adopt an attitude of prayer, whatever feels comfortable for you this morning. Gracious and loving God, we thank you for this opportunity to gather here. And the reality of the situation is that we are people. We are perfectly, gloriously, righteously imperfect. And there are times where we miss opportunities, huge opportunities, to recognize those people who were true giants, trailblazers, groundbreakers in our communities. And God, we appreciate the grace and forgiveness that you extend to us to circle around, to make things right, to close the circle, On this day, this Juneteenth, as we celebrate liberation across this country, we appreciate the opportunity to lift up this wonderful family that contributed so much to this community and set an example for all of us. And so let us not forget that the opportunities exist before us, new adventures and journeys to find, new people to recognize, those who have set the pace, set the tempo for us in ways of freedom, leadership, and example. We raise this prayer humbly this morning in all the names which we know you by. Amen.
Thank you so much, Reverend Hart. I appreciate that. So we're switching up the program slightly. I'm going to introduce our first selectman from Simsbury, Wendy McStudis, for our introduction.
Good morning. I guess I don't have to say I'm Wendy McStudis, first selectman. I want to welcome everyone here today. It's truly an honor for me to be here at this important event, which recognizes an American family who once lived right here in our town with ties to the bigger history in our country. While I am not a historian, like many of you, I've come to learn about Simsbury's past through the dedication of those who study and share it. Right here in town, we have our Simsbury Free Library and the Simsbury Historical Society doing this work to keep our story straight. In this case, John Mills has made it his mission through the Alex Brienne Corporation, a nonprofit organization, to uncover and preserve the history of chattel slavery. Remarkably, some of that history is rooted right here in Simsbury. This morning, you'll learn about Peter Jackson and Esther Wallace, two individuals with deep connections to Simsbury, whose grandchildren went on to serve in the Civil War. Despite having lived here for almost 40 years, this story is new to me. In today's world, it's more important than ever to have people committed to remembering and preserving our history for future generations so that we never forget it or see it altered into something unrecognizable. I have hope that we will all work to keep our stories straight. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank my members of the Board of Selectmen and our town manager, and I'm going to turn this back over to John. Thanks.
All right, we're going to move into a poem by an incredible poet that spoke at a ceremony that I had in Middletown earlier this year. She's remarkable. And she has a poem for you as it relates to Peter and Esther Jackson. Her name is Grace Figueroa.
Good morning, everybody. Let me tell you about a queen with worn shoes. Name was Mrs. Esther Jackson, walked with purpose and paid her dues. Born back in them times before the world cracked wide, lived to 93, still able to hold her pride. What we know is that Esther had to walk. She walked 2 miles to the church of Simsbury UMC. Rain or shine, she walked faithfully. Almost 50 years she sat in those pews, not for show, not for praise, but for the good word and the good news. Each step had to be meditative. It was time to be introspective, perhaps retrospective to a righteous path, for she walked that road till a week before she passed. Like as if the Lord said, rest now, and she exhaled her last. But that walk wasn't just for church, it was her legacy, the lineage, the soul work, the search. Esther had to walk. I'm sure she thought of her man, Peter Jackson, born from the Bayesian sands, once taken across waters and put up on display for a trade. Exchanged like breath, like money is to economic hands, snatched from what he knows and swapped him for a native soul. People, history doesn't whisper, it screams from the scroll. It's written in the trees and the dirt and the cobblestone. With all of this on her mind and in her heart and in her soul, Esther had to walk. Peter came from Barbados to Bermuda to this stage, to Simsbury fields where freedom wore pretty bracelets called chains. Built a life with her, bore children from the pain, 10 of them to be exact. But in 1810, the waters took her man back. This time, Esther stayed, rooted like oak through fire and frost, carrying the memory of every soul she lost like her father, London Wallace. That man held flame, fought in the French and Indian War, still wearing a slave name. As for her brothers, the three stood tall in revolution's rage, with a brother-in-law too stepping into freedom's stage. And they wasn't just black, they was battle-bound, free-willed, bled for a country that ain't seen them until they were stilled. Esther still had to walk. Then came her grandsons, 7 strong, answered to Civil War screams. 6 never returned, just whispers in Esther's dreams. She didn't live to see it, but she built the road they trod. From chains to choirs, from dirt to God, Esther had to walk. Today, we had a Miss Newton, a Miss Mays, and others beloved stand, walking with history in a maze. I'd be proud too, surely you'd understand. Esther didn't get to wear no crown, but she had to walk like she did. We all do this instinctively, bearing hope like a bid. So next time you think strength looks like muscles and steel, remember, it looked like worn shoes and a woman who had to heal. The Simsbury folk will always remember that. Esther had to walk. Poem. Thank you.
Told you she was good. All right now. I'd like to welcome the family here. Thank you all for attending. They traveled a long way to get here. We celebrate your ancestors. I'm gonna talk a little about what I know about your ancestors. And hopefully I do it justice. In the early 1640s, a young man named John Griffin arrived in the Connecticut colony from Walton, Wales. He settled in Windsor, bringing with him the skill of creating pitch and tar, a material commonly used on ships for waterproofing, commanding a high price. Young John Griffin set up a business with this skill. As settlers like John Griffin encroached on indigenous lands, the native people often pushed back by destroying the property of the settlers. To discourage this, the colony passed a law in 1646. Feeling jailing the indigenous was not effective, the law offered the indigenous offender as property to the settler for enslavement. The settler was given the option to keep the indigenous person or to ship the indigenous person to the West Indies and trade for an African. The following year, John Griffin benefited from this new law. When an elder indigenous man named Manahanus burned his property, The indigenous man was from a settlement called Masako. As punishment, Manahanus was given a fine of which he could not pay. So he was given to John Griffin as his enslaved man. The indigenous people of Masako feared Manahanus would be shipped to the West Indies. So they worked a deal out with John Griffin, giving him nearly all of their Masako land in exchange for the freedom of Manahanus. Years later, the courts took the Masako land from John Griffin and doled it out to many other white Americans. In 1670, that land was given the name Simsbury. John Griffin died in Simsbury in 1681, but his family continued in this area. In the early 1700s, his grandson, Stephen Griffin, acquired an enslaved man named London Wallace. London was a hard-working man who built his own home on the Simsbury property of his enslaver, planting apple trees around it. Sometime around 1750, London would marry a woman named Arana, described as a mulatto, meaning a person of mixed white and black ancestry. London and Arana had 2 children they named Arana and Zebulon. But before they could expand their family, London joined the 1st Regiment of the Connecticut Forces during the French and Indian War in 1756. On his return from war, London asked that his friends call him Colonel London Wallace. Not at all his rank, but it aligned with the pride that he felt about the service to his country. In 1757, London was given permission by his enslaver to purchase the house he built and land he lived on with his wife, Arana. London and Arana then continued to build their family, having 6 more kids. When their kids came of age, 3 followed in their father's footsteps, enlisting to serve in the Revolutionary War. Zebulon Wallace joined up with the 1st Connecticut Regiment. Joseph Wallace enlisted with the 2nd Connecticut Regiment. And London Wallace Jr. enlisted with the 3rd Connecticut Regiment. Sometime around 1780, London and Arana's daughter, Esther, married a man named Peter Jackson. It's here where that 1646 law allowing for shipping indigenous people to the West Indies and trade for Africans would once again come into play. In a manuscript written in 1922, George Mitchelson, a member of the pioneering tobacco family, suggested Peter Jackson was originally brought from Bermuda, the result of Indian trading. Even though Peter and Esther Jackson would go on to have 10 children and become an established black family within the Simsbury community. In 1797, Peter Jackson shows up in town records for the first time. He's listed in a land record, agreeing to take on the debt of his father-in-law, London Wallace. He shows up again in 1810, this time on the federal census. But in November of that same year, while traveling on the road from Turkey Hill to Simsbury, Peter Jackson slipped on the bridge, falling into Salmon Brook and drowning. I imagine this was an unbearable time for Esther Jackson. But through this, being one of the earliest members of the Simsbury United Methodist Church, she continued in her faith. In 1836, Esther purchased her own home and property from Chauncey Eno, the grand uncle of Antoinette Eno, who donated the building we are currently in to this town. A building where Martin Luther King Jr. watched movies as a teenager. He was here working the tobacco fields during the summers of 1944 and 1947. Young Martin watched movies in this very room. So it's quite appropriate that we are having this ceremony here. The home Esther purchased in 1836 existed on or about where Andrews Memorial Chapel sits on the property of Westminster School, off Hop Meadow. But with the Industrial Revolution well underway, the railroad came calling, so Esther sold her property to the New Haven and Northampton Railroad Company in 1849. She moved into a home that sat on current-day Hoskins Road, a short distance behind Antonio's restaurant, near the corner of Hoskins and Old Barge Road. I imagine it wasn't called Hoskins Road then, as her neighbors were Asa Hoskins and Noah Hoskins. In the 1850 census, there are 3 young men living in the household of Esther Jackson. They were her grandsons, William Jackson, Erastus Jackson, and Abraham Jackson. Little did she know that they would join 4 of her other grandsons in enlisting in the Union Army during the Civil War. Their heroism extraordinary. 3 of her grandsons refused to wait around for Connecticut to decide to allow black men to fight, which they didn't at the time and wouldn't until November of 1863. So 3 of her grandsons, wanting to fight and contribute, they left Connecticut to join colored regiments in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Of her 7 grandsons who went off to war, 6 of them never made it back home, dying in various states. Abraham Jackson died in Portsmouth, Rhode Island. William Jackson died in Virginia Beach, Virginia. James Jackson died in New Orleans, Louisiana. Cornelius Reeder died in Hampton, Virginia. George Reeder died in Dedham, Massachusetts. And Erastus Jackson died in Plaquemine, Louisiana. His remains lost, so he has no marked grave in this country. The blessing in all of this is Esther didn't live to see any of that occur. She died in 1857, 6 years prior to their enlistment. She was known in this town for walking the 2-mile distance from her home on Hoskins Road to Simsbury United Methodist Church. At 93 years old, she made this journey one last time, 8 days prior to her death. A strength and resilience that exemplifies her entire family. Her funeral ceremony was held at the church, her obituary published in the Connecticut Current. It said she was born in Windsor, had been living in Simsbury since around 1777. Remember, there was no documentation of them until 1797. It said she retained her strength and faculties to an unusual degree. It said throughout her long life she enjoyed the confidence and kind affections of all who knew her. She left in death a large circle of friends and family. Her funeral sermon preached to a large audience directly across the street from this building. Peter and Esther Jackson are buried in a prominent location amongst white Americans of their time. This is unusual. Generally, black people of that time, even here in the North, were buried in the back of the cemetery or in the woods behind it. More often, they have no headstones. Peter and Esther Jackson not only have a prominent headstone, so do 3 of their children. Buried right next to them is their son, Harry Jackson, and his wife, Lavinia, 2 of their sons dying in the Civil War. Peter and Esther's daughter, Esther, is buried next to them, as is their daughter, Phoebe Reeder, who also had 2 sons who died during the Civil War. This is an extraordinary black family, a product of this town, a black family that was enslaved to those who took this land from the indigenous, one that was affected by the exchange of the indigenous from Africans for Africans in the West Indies. They were part of the tobacco industry, which this area is famous for, and affected by the railroad making its way through this town. Peter and Esther Jackson were God-fearing people. They were landowners at a time when that was unusual for black Americans. But along with all of that, if that wasn't enough, they had 12 members of their family who served in 3 conflicts that represent the creation of the nation we live in, establishing the freedoms we enjoy today. 6 of them dying at war. They did all of that from the shadows, scarcely known to anyone here. No buildings named in their honor. No streets bearing their names exist. as exists for their neighbors. No portraits presented with reverence, nor monuments celebrating their contributions. Well, today, we change all that. Today, we celebrate the iconic American family of Peter and Esther Jackson of Simsbury, Connecticut. I'd like to thank a few people who helped me along the way. I see Mel Smith from the Connecticut State Library who helped me graciously with information on Peter Jackson's death. I'd like to thank the late Mary Nason of the Simsbury Historical Society for her research in the 1990s that led me on this journey. I'd like to thank the late Carol Long of the Salmon Brook Historical Society, whose research and amazing collection of her notes became a resource to me. I'd like to thank Sarah Langdon, I saw her in the back, the archivist at the Salmon Brook Historical Society, who was incredibly helpful and kind to me. I'd like to thank Jane McAlpine, Iki Scully, Barbara Strong, and Tony Braz of the Simsbury Historical Society for their support and willingness to sit with this over-the-top genealogist who had a story to tell. I'd like to thank Town Manager Mark Nelson for the many things he has done in support, including helping us gain access to this amazing building. I'd like to thank Shannon Leary and Carolyn Clement for all they've done to help me bring this story to the community that Peter and Esther's family represented. I'd like to thank Jay Eno of Simsbury Cemetery, who has been an incredible partner. And finally, to all the donors from around the country who helped me raise the $8,000 required to produce the monument we will unveil later today. You've given this town a gift, and I thank you. And finally, in closing, people of Simsbury, you now know their story. We have a monument that tells it, but it's contained within the confines of a cemetery. My challenge to you, where else can we take it? Thank you, guys. Thank you. And before we proceed, I want to ask the family if you all can step forward and come up here with me, come around me. I want to share something with you. Let's come around me. A friend of mine that I've been working with for a few years who does woodworking. And I told her about the story of Peter and Esther Jackson. And she said, well, we gotta do something to celebrate them. I said, okay, well, let me know. So she built something for you all to take home in memory. And so I'm gonna pull it out. I had to get a bag to hold it. It's kind of big, hold on. If the lineage true. That shows you your genealogy down to a woman with the maiden name Bonnie D. Sands. I'm assuming it's standing right here. So we're gonna offer this to you all. If you need me to ship it back to North Carolina, I can ship it. It's kind of big. You got room? Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
while I figure out how to zip that back up, I'm gonna introduce State Representative representing this district, Melissa Osborne.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here to honor this incredible family and commemorate them here in our town. But I have to say, I had some prepared remarks that are going out the window now because I had to follow this just absolutely incredible presentation by John Mills this morning. Thank you so much. Today we're gathering to unveil this monument, and it is a physical symbol, but the purpose is to lift up and celebrate the legacy of this incredible family. And I want to thank so much, the descendants who are here today to celebrate with us, and have honored us. I mean, they've traveled all the way from North Carolina, just got here. So thank you so much for being here today with us. Thank you. And while my prepared remarks are now completely and utterly useless, I will say I was thinking about sort of chucking them anyhow last night. I was thinking about this extraordinary family story, and really thinking about what that meant to us today beyond prepared remarks. And I was so drawn to the legacy that we have here today. And specifically Esther, served her community, served her family, but did so alone for so long. She lost her husband early on, and yet she persevered. And it made me think so much about the daily life struggles that everybody experiences. Into every life some rain falls, and an extraordinary amount of rain fell for Esther. And she endured under remarkably difficult circumstances. And many of us feel the weight and the burden of life's vicissitudes as they come to us, whether it's the loss of a spouse or an illness or a divorce or a loss of a job. We all experience these tragedies in our lives. And Esther teaches us to keep going. Because sitting here today, just when we sometimes might think, what is the point of keeping on trying? It's just one life anyhow. It's not just one life. We saw from this incredible genealogy lineage that John prepared, and from the people who are sitting here today, the perseverance, the hard work, the getting up every day, the walking the 2 miles to church and back, to endure and to stay true to herself and to her values and her community. Look at what it has created. One person persevering, understanding that she mattered, and the legacy that she left for her grandchildren, who made extraordinary sacrifices for our country. And we have her descendants sitting here before us today, teaching us that every effort we make today will resound for generations to come. So it's not just one life. It's not what does it matter. It matters extraordinarily. And I am honored to be part of honoring her perseverance, her sacrifice. I'm honored to be here to unveil this monument and hope that we as a community can remember to honor not just this family one time in the cemetery today, but to do what we can to honor the legacy and the message of their lives. So thank you so much for being here today. I know afterward, this is a long overdue remembrance, and it is very fitting that we are doing this today on Juneteenth, a day when we remember not just the end of slavery, but the enduring legacy of those who lived and resisted and fought and died before freedom ever reached them. So to her descendants today, thank you again for being with us. Your ancestors built more than a family. And may this monument that we are going to unveil today remind us that the road to justice is long, but walked with purpose just like Esther walked that 2-mile path. So may we keep walking it in her name and her memory. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Representative Osborne. I appreciate that and your words. And now we'll keep it going. I know we're running a little bit behind. With reflections from State Senator Paul Honig.
Good morning, and thank you all for inviting me to be a part of this important day. My name's Paul Honig. I'm proud to represent Simsbury along with 10 other towns of the 8th District in the State Senate. Want to thank Shannon Leary, my friend, for inviting me here, the town of Simsbury for doing this important work, the Historical Society for everything they do, and most of all, John Mills for making this day possible. I'm sure it's not lost on any of us that we're gathering here on Juneteenth, our newest state and federal holiday. It's a day that asks us all to reflect honestly on our history, both the parts we choose to remember and the events and the people we have too often ignored. Today we're here to reflect on that latter part. We're here to recognize some of the figures and voices whose contributions have been largely overlooked and would likely have stayed that way were it not for the important work of John Mills, whose impeccable research brings us all here today. Thanks to John, we know of the remarkable lives of Peter and Esther Jackson, a formerly enslaved family whose children and grandchildren fought for, and in many cases died for, this nation. A family whose legacy and contributions helped shape the town of Simsbury. A family whose descendants honor us with their presence here today. I was asked to be brief in my remarks, and I intend to respect that request. But I feel compelled to offer one more thought. And although I don't want to politicize today's event, I do feel it's essential to note the importance of what we're doing here, honoring the historical contributions of a formerly enslaved family who endured profound injustice and sacrificed more than anyone had any right to ask them to. I say it's essential because we're in the midst of ongoing efforts to diminish or downplay the role of Black Americans in our shared story. Whether it's the removal of Black Lives Matters murals or the disappearance of materials that highlight the contributions of people of color from federal websites, these actions send a disturbing message about whose history is deemed worthy of preserving. So let's celebrate the work of researchers like John Mills. Let us commemorate the lives of Americans like Esther and Peter Jackson, and let's make a conscious choice to tell the full story of America, even the parts some would prefer to see rewritten. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you so much for those words, Senator Honig. I'm going to welcome up, we're switching this up a little bit. Senator Blumenthal his office called me this morning and they said they're still trying, but they didn't think they were going to make it. So instead, I'm going to welcome up Town Manager Mark Nelson to offer something to the families. So if you can come up once again.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Nelson. I'm proud to serve as your town manager and to fill in unexpectedly, but it's a great privilege and honor to present the family with an official statement and proclamation from Connecticut's Governor, Ned Lamont. And I'd like to read that to you all this morning. Whereas we come together to honor Peter and Esther Jackson, a historic Black couple whose enduring legacy has profoundly impacted Connecticut. And whereas Peter, brought from Barbados in the mid-1770s, and Esther Wallace, the daughter of a courageous soldier from the French and Indian War, embody resilience, strength, and unyielding faith. And whereas the unveiling of a monument at Simsbury Cemetery today, on June 19th, 2025, will pay tribute to their sacrifices and honor the sacrifices of their family in defining our nation's history. And whereas we respect Peter and Esther Jackson, their remarkable impact on our community, our state, and our nation, now therefore, I, Ned Lamont, Governor of the state of Connecticut, in recognition of their sterling fortitude, do hereby officially honor Peter and Esther Jackson in the state of Connecticut. Signed, Ned Lamont.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you, Town Manager. I appreciate that, and again, Richard Blumenthal's office sends his best wishes. I'd like to now welcome up the Director of Equity and Access at Simsbury Public Schools to give us a few words, Tyresha Batchelor.
Good morning. Can you hear me? I may have to use my teacher voice. Good morning. Happy Juneteenth. Today is a celebration. We honor their journey from bondage to liberation today, not just as a national story, but the story of Esther and her family is a Simsbury story, one that we are proud of, one that we will carry, one that we will be talking about in the school system so that people will know from where they've come and continue to build on the legacy. So today is a day of liberation and celebration. Thank you for being here. Esther walked in the spaces that we are in now. And as the Director of Equity and Access for the public schools and as a Black woman, I am honored to be in the spaces that she was in. I wonder what she saw and how she felt, because how I feel is liberated. I feel free. I feel that I'm in a place where our past is there, but our present is always also evident. The memories and legacies of those like Esther Jackson cannot and will not be erased. They will live in this land, they will live in Simsbury, and in the faith that she walked in, and in the descendants you who carried her truth with grace and strength. I know it was not easy hearing the stories of people who were not recognized. I know that it's painful when we start to look at our past, but I hope that you have comfort in knowing that we celebrate her legacy. So to the Jackson family, thank you for your resilience, for grounding this community and her legacy, which runs deep. And with heartfelt gratitude, I have to thank those like John and others who have uncovered and lifted these stories. When we tell our stories, we need to tell them from a place of comfort and respect and joy. Our stories don't begin with the bad history and the bad parts of the country, it begins with our resilience and our joy. And we know that she experienced joy here. So in Simsbury, what do we need to do? We need to be reminded that the history has to be remembered, but also revealed. We have to commit to honoring the truth and not allow history to be buried, forgotten, or rewritten. Instead, we have to keep uncovering it together. Some people say, well, what took so long? 2 years, Juneteenth. What took so long? Why did it take 2 years for people to know that they were free? Well, part of it is because we have to make sure that we share our freedom with everyone and with others. We have to make sure that we know each other's names and we know each other's stories. We have to be a little bit more vulnerable when we tell our stories and make sure that everyone can see themselves in the stories that we're sharing. So I thank you for being here, and I want you to continue to work with me and with this community. And when this day is over, make sure that you check in on someone. Make sure you check in and make sure people know your names and your stories. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you so much, Tyresha. I appreciate that. I'll keep us moving. I met Shannon Leary a year or two ago, and she was very supportive of the work I was doing, and she's very instrumental in getting the information that we were kind of pulling together introduced to the Historical Society and the people of this town. So I'm honored that she agreed to speak today. So I'm going to welcome up community organizer Shannon Leary.
Thank you so much, John. What an honor it is for me to be here today to memorialize the Jackson family and to welcome their descendants here to Simsbury. Yay, finally! While on my own journey to learn more about the enslaved people of Connecticut, a friend, Carolyn Clement, encouraged me to follow John's work. And what a tremendous joy that has been. John doesn't just put a name on a marker. He brings untold stories of perseverance and struggle and resolve to life. He names those who have been lost to time and ignorance. He tells us who they were, who they loved. In doing so, he gives them the dignity and respect that every human deserves. Like Peter and Esther Jackson. Thanks to John and his work, Peter, Esther, and the Jackson family are an undeniable part of Simsbury. They lived where we live. They walked where we walk. Their family is our family. Their story is now ours to caretake and to shepherd. Peter and Esther Jackson were forcibly brought to our town of Simsbury. Peter and Esther Jackson were enslaved in our town of Simsbury. Peter and Esther Jackson, whose relatives fought for this country, lived in our town of Simsbury. Peter and Esther lived here, walked here, loved here in our town of Simsbury. Let's always remember to tell their stories. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And again, thank you for all of your support. I do appreciate it. Now I'd like to welcome up someone I met when I think, Jane, I think you were just kind of recently in your role, and here I come with all these papers. You know, I felt like I just talked you guys to death. Like I went too far. I went home and I told my wife, I just went too far. But thank you for listening. Thank you. She has to deal with that every day. But I'd like to welcome up the Executive Director of Simsbury Historical Society, Jane McAlpine.
Thank you, John and Erica, for organizing today's event and for inviting me to say a few words. And it's interesting being in one of the last speaker roles. There are recurring themes here. We're all getting it. We're all taking something away. So yes, John, we first met last September, and I was captivated by the story that you recounted of Esther and Peter Jackson. I'd grown up in this town, and I'd never heard it. In hindsight, the story you shared that day was just the prologue, however, to the multi-layered story that has since unfolded. I admire your passion for your work, I admire your research skills, and I appreciate your sharing your knowledge with the community. Who was Esther Jackson? We'll never truly know, but I like to think of her as a pioneer. I envision Esther walking to and from church every Sunday, her head held high, a woman of strong spirit. I can't imagine, though, what it was like to walk in her shoes, a first-generation free Black woman in Simsbury, with only her knowledge of her surroundings and internal beliefs to guide her. What invisible burdens did she carry when she walked? We know she was born in turbulent times, on the precipice of the American Revolution, not long after her father gained his freedom. Years later, when Esther provided a written statement about her brother's Revolutionary War service in order for them to receive their pensions, she left an indelible mark in the historic record. She was clearly a woman of strong conviction and an advocate for her family. And as John said, her obituary tells us that she was well admired and loved by the community. Like their grandmother, Esther Jackson's grandsons walked bravely amidst troubling times too. They embarked on the path to war, the Civil War, our nation's deadliest conflict, abolishing slavery across the land, including finally Texas, 160 years ago today. At the Simsbury Historical Society, the past, present, and future are more than themes published on our website. They are points on a figurative path, orienting us in our endless search for knowledge and understanding. As official town historians, we conduct and support research that illuminates events and sometimes contradictions, painful experiences, and injustices. Because what is the value of studying history if we don't learn from it and use our newfound knowledge to create a bright and promising future for all? So again, thank you, Town of Simsbury, for allowing us use of this building today and posting a safety officer for public safety outside as we cross the street. I also want to acknowledge Mary L. Nason, the late Mary L. Nason, who in 1996 wrote an academic paper under the cover of the Simsbury Historical Society about African Americans in Simsbury, as well as the late Carol Long, also acknowledged earlier. And as others have said, we have resources available to us. I want to acknowledge the Connecticut State Library, the Connecticut Museum of Culture and History, the Yukon Library, Connecticut Humanities, National Endowment for the Humanities, National Archives, and all who preserve historic records and make public information for anyone seeking to learn about local, state, and national history or their cultural heritage. I want to extend thanks to our elected officials present today and those in the past who have protected our freedoms, including access to public records like those discovered and very skillfully pieced together by John to bring the complete Jackson family story to life. Today, June 19th, 2025, we honor a local family with over a century of military service to the early colonies and to our fledgling nation. Their lives mattered. We recognize their hardships and sacrifices and the injustices they suffered. Their story has led us to where we stand today, side by side, in this present moment. But today will soon become tomorrow's history. We are a state and a people advancing together along the continuum of time. Together we find new strength to shoulder the burdens passed down to us by previous generations and to press ahead on our journey of knowledge and understanding. I draw inspiration from the Jacksons, and I thank them and countless others who believed in, worked for, and sometimes gave their lives to the cause of ever greater freedom and justice for all. To the descendants of Peter and Esther Jackson, welcome to Simsbury. And to the souls of Peter and Esther's grandsons who lost their lives in the Civil War and whose bodies were never returned, I say welcome home.
Thank you so much, Jane. That was wonderful. Really quick, I want to just give you like a little context to this banner behind me. In January 1863, with the Emancipation Proclamation going into effect, states started creating colored regiments in the North. One state that did not was Connecticut. They thought that was scary to let a black man have a gun. And so they refused to start a colored regiment, which is why 3 of Peter and Esther Jackson's sons left and joined regiments in Rhode Island and in Massachusetts. But by November of 1863, the federal government was coming down on Connecticut because they were 1,700 men short of their quota, which kind of forced the state to create the 29th Connecticut Colored Regiment. And men came from all over this area, even outside of Connecticut, to join that regiment. It ended up with more men than they needed, so they created an overflow regiment called the 30th Connecticut Colored Regiment. Those men fought valiantly. The 29th was the first regiment to enter the burning capital of the Confederacy, Richmond. They stayed there until President Lincoln showed up with his 12-year-old son, Tad, to tour the devastation. And on Juneteenth, they were en route to Texas, arriving on June 26th to perform garrison duty in Texas. In October of that same year, they were on their way back to Connecticut. They had a parade in New Orleans. They were given a hero's welcome in New York. 4 of Peter and Esther Jackson's grandsons were a part of that regiment. Their names are on that banner. But when they got to New York, they found out the month prior the state of Connecticut had voted that black men should not be allowed to vote. So they were a little perturbed with coming back to this state. When they got here, they went up to the Connecticut Old State House and they stood at the State House and they listened to Governor Buckingham basically apologize to them for this state. 4 of Peter and Esther's grandsons stood at the Connecticut Old State House listening to Governor Buckingham provide that apology. In Boston, there's a monument that sits right across the street from the Massachusetts Old State House. It was placed there in the 1890s, celebrating the 54th Massachusetts Colored Regiment. But today in Connecticut, if you go to the Old State House, there is nothing there that mentions they were ever there. So I produced this so that it could come with me when I speak. So it's a traveling monument. So if you would like to look at the names, you can. If you get closer, you can see the names. Again, 4 of Peter and Esther Jackson's grandsons are on that display. And one day, I'm hopeful that the state will see fit to change that. Okay, and we'll move on. I have an artist here who painted a portrait. I asked him if he could take photographs that were given to me by the family of some of the descendants, grandkids of Peter and Esther Jackson, and create a piece of art reflecting a reimagined depiction of what Esther may have looked like. Because of that time, it's very rare for Black Americans to have themselves represented in a painting. So we wanted to change that. And so I want to welcome up Kern Bruce so that he can tell you about what his thoughts were regarding the painting, and then we will unveil it. And here, Kern Bruce.
I'll be very brief, guys. Hi, my name is Kern Bruce. I'm a local artist from New London. And John asked me to do this. He told me the story behind it, the history behind it, the meaning behind it. And I see a lot of very familiar faces that I used to synthesize or create the image. Just thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me be a part of this. And with that, I guess we could do the unveiling.
Let's do it. Let's do it. This is a little awkward. We're going to try to figure it out. I don't want to block Shannon either. Let me set this back You guys might have to stand. I'm sorry. I don't know how to make it so that every angle can see it. Ready? Yep. Again, Kern took images of actual descendants to try to formulate what Esther may have looked like. So he's a very talented artist, and I'm grateful that he agreed to work with us on this. This is going to be a part of a collection. The collection is called the William Downey Memorial Collection. William Downey was my wife's uncle and lived about a mile from the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis. Used to tell me stories of the day MLK was assassinated. He was a community activist. He ran a food pantry. And so he just continued on with that work after MLK was assassinated. And so in his honor, he died 4 years ago. In his honor, we're creating a collection of portraits of African Americans to be a part of an exhibit that will travel. And this portrait will be one of those 6 portraits that will be on display somewhere in the state as a part of the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 2026. So thank you, Kern, for being a part of that effort. And with that, again, my apologies for the time. This concludes the ceremony here. But now we're going to take that walk across the street to look at the new monument that's been installed in honor of Peter and Esther Jackson. So if you guys can follow us all, make your way across the street. All right, again, thank you all for coming out here for the unveiling of the monument. Again, I'd like to also thank Shelley Brothers Monuments in Guilford. I don't know why I forgot that. In Guilford, for working this monument in. Mark Omerod, who is here from Monument Preservation, who cleaned the stones for us. And the cemetery, and Jay Eno, who worked with me to get, hey, I finally get, I'm sorry, I interrupted because I finally met Jay. In order for us to have the monument installed, I'm really happy about that. And he helped me with another surprise that we'll talk about actually first. Here you have the headstone of Peter and Esther Jackson. It was placed here 50 years after Peter had died in 1810. The documentation of the inquest of his death, the O looked like a 9. So they put 1819 on the stone. But it's actually 1810, thanks to Mel Smith from the Connecticut State Library. We got that correctly. But I just kind of replicated what was here on the monument so as not to conflict. But that's the accurate history. This here is their daughter, Esther. And this here is their daughter, Phoebe, who married George Reeder. And they had 2 sons that died in the Civil War. Here is Harry and Lavinia Jackson. They also had 2 sons who died in the Civil War, one of whom died in Plaquemine, Louisiana, and his remains were lost, and so he had no headstone. So the VA agreed to send us a cenotaph stone in his honor, and so the cemetery was gracious enough to install that headstone right in front of his parents. So now he has a marker and people can see his story. And as it relates to Peter and Esther Jackson, we debated about putting it in the center, and I kind of wanted it closest to Peter and Esther. And so this is where we placed it. And with that, feel free to thank you all so much for coming. I do appreciate it. Feel free to come up and check it out. Let me know. got to take that back with you. I'll ship it.
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town.
Bringing us together through local programming,
Education, and live broadcasts.
SEM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community, ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings, and celebrating milestones
like our high school graduations.
But today, SEM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions. And it's no secret, people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SEM receives less revenue,
even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
We need your support.
We need your support. We need your support.
we need your support.
Your donation can make a difference. It will ensure that SCM remains open,
Continues to educate our youth and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SCM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive
For generations to come.
Visit our website.
Or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media,
Where your town,
Your schools
and your government come together.